Welcome to Victoria Electric Vehicle Association Zoom meeting for the 18th of March. This is number 004 of our new era. And we'll kick off today. We've got 3 different presentations, and I think you're going to enjoy them. First off, a couple housekeeping notes. We do have lots of swag still available. We have men's and women's t-shirts, any color you like, as long as it's black. Masks, which we hope will be a collector's item sometime in the future. And the other thing is we have our annual spring electric vehicle count coming up 17th of May from 0630 in the morning to 0900. And we'll cover off all the major entrances to the Greater Victoria area, count all the EVs, much like the flower count people do, and probably is scientifically accurate, actually probably more accurate than what they do.
And issue warnings to the media about people on bridges.
Yes, we'll wear, hazard pennies and warn the media again. No people trying to jump off bridges. Yeah, we're going to need volunteers for that, so please keep your eyes open. You can respond to us at the regular connections, and we'll take you on board. Coffee on us afterwards. So today, 3 presentations. We have Chris Palliser with Shift Solar. He'll talk to us a lot about solar here in Victoria and how awesome it is. We'll also have from Edwards Electric, Liam MacFarlane, and he'll talk to us about how great or how you can make your house support EV charging and what the future can bring for that. And then we'll have another presentation, which I'll do, which is it's about Cobalt concerns in context. So during the presentations, please put your questions in the chat. Mics will be off, and then when the presentation is complete, Heather will read off your questions, and we'll get our expert to answer them. So, without further ado, I'm going to start off with Lee MacFarlane from Edwards Electric. Come on in, Lee. Let's do this.
Great. Thank you for having me. Always great to see you all. Just seeing if I recognize many of you from past meetings. I'm sure I do. So I didn't produce a PowerPoint today. I usually do have many of those to kind of fall back on. Let's put it this way. There's so much happening in the EV charging world in our in our avenue of where we're at in our lane in regards to how to actually install a charger, and if you can install a charging system for your home or your townhome system or even your condo system. So I'm going to kind of bypass fancy pictures and not get in the way of good data and conversation. So a little about myself. I do lead our EV charging division at Edwards Electric. If you can imagine, 10 years ago, I ran an independent company. It varied in size. At the time, it was about 3 or 4 guys with boots on the ground electricians doing work, doing your renovation in your home and so on. Now I run a division where we have 3 or 4 people strictly doing EV charging designs and estimating, and for the sole purpose of planning for EV charging. That's all we do in the office. So that doesn't include the 10 to 20 people we have in the field doing the work itself of charging. So what I wanted to present for you today is a bit of a lay of the land in that regard. So a little bit more, I do work with the BC Electric Vehicle Working Group, which is it's a group that's hosted by Technical Safety BC, and I lead the committee for contractor, designer, and engineer expectations and designs for BC. So all my committee that I lead has strata associations. It has people who've written the code for Section 86 of the EV charging. let's see, manufacturers. We have some from Siemens and a few others across Canada, and on and on. A large, and also the committee as a whole and the group as a whole has representatives of all the senior inspectors in BC and all the major cities. So it's a good group of core people that are really trying to puzzle out a lot of the EV charging issues that we're running into, and that we're trying to not inundate you with those details, right? As a consumer, as a person that's doing your work, you know, you need to call us, you need to be insured, you're getting good service, you're getting the right advice, and you're getting a charging system for your electric vehicle. It's as simple as that. We're trying to do all the back end work for legalities, and actual equipment that's legal to use in Canada and all these other sort of things. I'm also part of a VISOA, Vancouver Island Strata Owner Association. If you go to their website, a webinar series funded by Clean BC. And I'm also very active, such as I'm going to the EV Charging Summit in Las Vegas next week now, I guess, for 4 or 5 days. So that's my position. The lay of the land, just to kind of give you a bit of what's happening across BC right now. So we've served to date over 200 MURBs and townhomes and single family homes. This represents about 15,000 owners and stalls, and which we are currently designing with and ready to do the work for, and so on. So a bit of perspective there's about 900,000 condos in BC. This 15,000 represents only 1.5% of all condos in BC. So, and we've been told between ourselves and another, partner engineering company that we work with, we do the majority of the large or small condo and strata designs across BC. So if you can imagine, then there's probably about 800,000 owners in condos that haven't necessarily gone the steps to get EV charging. They may be thinking about it, they may be working on it within their own strata, but they're not quite at that stage yet. So we're just at that, if you can imagine that iceberg, if you will, right? So we are, as a business and as an industry, anticipating through our own data as well, this to be changing quite drastically, very quickly. And there's a number of reasons for that. We usually do see a push in data, in engagement with people around October and July, specifically stratas and MURBs, because a lot of spring and fall decisions are made with the AGMs in that time period, right? So we've also made, if you can imagine, a little bit more lay of land, we've installed about 1,000 stalls, so owner, single family home, MURBs, townhomes, 1,000 owners to have EV ready stalls. So not quite having the charger in place or whatever it might be, level 1, level 2. And that's over 3 years, okay, in the last 3 years. We are scheduled this year for another 1,000. So that's the difference, right? It's quite a bit, quite drastic. And in another kind of fact, over the last 3 years, we've installed about 300 level 2 chargers. We are anticipating 200 just this year. So again, a big push in that respect. So one of the things that does come up for a lot of people is that they see new buildings go up and they're not necessarily, the developers aren't necessarily putting in the infrastructure and so on. The city of Penticton, actually, Drayden Power, who used to be with Fortis and part of our team, our provincial team, he's moved from Fortis to the city of Penticton now, and they've created a good system that we're trying to recommend for other municipalities across BC to have not just new buildings being partially ready for EV charging. They either are EV prepared or EV ready. So EV prepared means at least get in the pipe work. It's simple to do when you're just putting in the concrete and so on. Might as well do it at that point. Or you go the full step to be EV ready. It is interesting to know, I've had many conversations in the last year where developers, and you might, I've also been a past president of the Canadian Home Builders Association, so I get it. Developers sometimes are looking at their bottom line more than anything, but we are seeing quite a bit of developers really pushing and investing themselves to have the EV charging system, and they have that capacity in their budget to actually put in there, irrespective if there's bylaws or not. So we are seeing that coming down the pipe. For example, I just had a good meeting with West Hills, where they have 130 condo units, and they are looking to do the whole shebang, right? And there was no bylaws at the time to actually do that. So it's quite amazing to see that. They are putting that effort in there. It is then a competitive advantage, right? It goes back to money a bit, right? Because it is now a checkbox for realtors going into your building saying, do you have some sort of EV charging capability, right? So another interesting statistic is, on the average, for our installed EV ready owners, so we're talking now mainly MURBs, not single family homes. When we make a building EV ready, that means that all the infrastructure is there so that they can put a level 2 charger in. About 28% opt to have an actual EV charger at that time. Okay, now that data is mixed in with the developers, right? Because they usually put in a bit more. They're not really sure. It's more of a selling feature, right? So it could be down to about 25%, but that's quite significant, right? In that data. Doesn't mean that these owners, though, that are getting these chargers actually have an EV. Well, sometimes not. There is 3 or 4 situations here. Either they do have an electric vehicle already, and they're wanting to get a charger right away, or they have one on order and hopefully get one in the next 20 years, who knows. They anticipate buying one in the next 5 years, or lastly, they actually have the charger installed just for the resale value and to take advantage of the current rebate. All right, so that's the lay of the land of what we're seeing in the industry, and it's very fast-paced. There's a lot happening. It's hard to keep up. We're continuing to add to our team to do that. So I want to now just kind of shift a little into the rebates, because rebates usually push the envelope as to the decision-making process to single-family homes or even townhomes or condos. So I want to kind of reiterate.
Lee, your mic kicked off.
Well, that's interesting. All right, I just wanted to touch now upon and transition to rebates. So these rebates will be available for a number of years as far as we see. Yeah, but we do anticipate the rebates, just like any electrical rebates in the past, such as LED lighting rebates. The LED lighting rebates were available 20 odd years ago. I remember it was big news. You could transition from your old T12 lighting to LED, and there'd be a good rate of return, especially with the rebates available. It's gone to a point now, after so many years, that this rebate program actually still exists, but it still exists to a point where it might as well not. And what we see is the same sort of situation with the either vehicle. I'm not going to get into vehicle rebates. It's not my specialty, but we're talking about rebates to help with the EV charging themselves. But we do see the dialing back, kind of like we see with countries like Norway, who have 80% of their sales as electric vehicles. Are we going to get close to that within 5-7 years? Because 2035 is our deadline when we cannot, our mandate from our government that we cannot buy a new gas vehicle. Are we going to see a dialing back of the rebates before then, right? Because that is what we're seeing with a lot of government entities when they have rebates. There's a critical mass of people that do take advantage of the rebate program to a point where the government will pat themselves on the back and say, okay, we've done our job, let's start dialing it back, right? That's just what will happen. So at this time, they will start dialing back. I personally anticipate that in a good 4 to 5 years, that's when that point might start really dialing back. Who knows though? No one does know at this point. But there's interesting points of why the rebate program in BC will continue. Obviously, and I won't get to it because I'm sure there is conversation within the Victoria EV Club about the provincial targets and the push for EVs and so on. But there is more subtle things, and the most subtle and important item is carbon credits. Okay. The Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation since 2022 is now in charge of the Clean BC rebate program. Okay. Now, why is this important? It's because they also control the carbon credits for BC. All right. So if you install a level 2 charger on your property and you are a strata or a type of building that has over 4 units, you must register those chargers and report its yearly kilowatt hour usage. If you do not, you're not in compliance and will be fined. It is a law. Right. So it's a bit of a issue though, because it's something stratas aren't used to, right? Because you now have to become what's called a Part 3 fuel supplier. You know, a lot of people that I know that are stratas are doing this, they are doing it themselves, but it takes a bit of work and time and effort. And who are you designating to do that? And how are you going to sell the credits, right? Because the only people buying carbon credits are the large oil companies in BC, right? So how is this making our earth greener? I don't know, but hey, you know, it's incentives. It makes sense in some way down the line. So that's why it's a big deal that the rebates will be available, because the ministry is also supporting carbon credit. They want to ensure people in MURBs get on the train so that, you know, eventually they can have EV charging systems that are viable for their building. We're just talking about MURBs and single family homes and providing the pathways initially for new construction. For MURBs, the problem though is, and this is a very important point, that I try to stay far away from rules and bylaws, but I know enough to stay out of the way of them. One thing that's very important with new buildings that are produced as condos or townhomes is that a strata is not able to legally create a new bylaw for another 1.5 years after the building is completed. So that means if the developer has not created systems in place for the strata and the condo and association to manage their own system that they have, they may be out of pocket, or they may not have a system that they actually like or they want, right? So this is a very important point that developers need to address, that we help developers with on our end as much as we can to ensure that they provide that pathway so that it makes sense for the strata that is overtaking the building eventually.
Yeah, and if there's any way we can help in kind of spreading, if you've got a package that we can ship out to municipalities, say, hey, give your new developers, you know, this sort of package and build this into things. Because I was a first owner in a new development, and they definitely set up all the rules to benefit the developer and not the people who have to live here. So it was really challenging getting some of that stuff squared off once we were able to.
Yeah, we can, if you want to follow up after that, that's great. So I heard that we're back online recording. So
yeah, I'm recording to the cloud, and hopefully we'll be able to get this all stitched together.
That's okay. It's just me. Don't need any of it. So moving on then, I was going to just talk about just lay of the land when it comes to fleets. So, you know, it kind of goes back to talking about, you know, how we as individuals and owners, you know, we're looking to get an electric vehicle, or we have an electric vehicle. But what about the businesses that have, like ourselves, we have 20 vehicles on the road. We did a lot of research and work in the last 2 years to try to start changing our fleet so that it is electric, right? And it is just business-wise, it is not feasible at this point. And I'm sure that you recognize the basic reason. We just can't get vehicles. That's the first reason. We have 5 F-150 Lightnings on order, and we can get one if we wanted to pay another $20,000. That's great. Wow, what a deal. It doesn't make business sense at this time for us to move forward. So, but why I just bring it up is that transition is and will take time. The capacity is not there yet, but once the FedEx, Amazon companies, the large companies get their orders filled of electric vehicles in North America, that will start trickling down to us and municipalities. The municipalities right now, like I believe, a couple of you were at the meeting with the CRD where the city of Victoria and the CRD were there presenting their start of their EV fleet. They are mandated by policy to do this. They are struggling to make it work and to make it work in budget, right? It is no question that the maintenance and the cost of these EVs are great. That's not a question. It's actually getting the product and for a reasonable price that still fits within their budget, as well as their tools and so on that they use within their building as well. So that's a bit of a lay of the land there. It is coming. I think it's like any of us within BC and within the Victoria EV Club that we're very positive about it. It's just going to take time, and we just keep on pushing that. Okay. So when it comes now to single-family homes, I'm going to talk about to help probably many of you in this discussion of what's coming up, and also to kind of tee up with what Chris is probably going to talk about. Just so it's clear, there's no conflict of interest here. Swift Energy and Chris, they're our go-to team when it comes to solar. They're, in our eyes, they're the leaders. So when it comes to solar installations, batteries, working with the homeowner to see, what's your capacity and so on, we rely on them, right? They are the experts in that field, right? We know our lane. But there's a few nuances that are coming out that is very interesting that will change or, kind of put a different spin on your potential solar anticipated needs as well. So one of the things that's coming out, and because I'm thankfully in position talking directly with senior inspectors across BC, they're now working on a bulletin that will come out shortly. It should have come out about 2 weeks ago, but it's not there yet. What this bulletin will do will allow a single family home to acquire your BC Hydro information to prove how much power you're actually using, okay? So that you can increase your power usage with EV charging. So this also has to do with showing what you need for solar as well. So this is now going to be a bulletin that will be quasi-law then for electrical contractors and solar installers. So if you don't mind, I'm going to, if I can share my screen here.
Yep, go ahead.
I can go through a process that I can show all of your people on this call how to actually get your load report. So I'm going to go through the whole process here, everyone. So you can see I'm going to BC Hydro. Sorry if it's a small font here. I'll try to, no, we'll just move on. So everyone in BC Hydro that has a hydro account, you're able to go to this website at BC Hydro and put in your information so that you can pay your bills or actually collect your data of your own home. So I'm just going to bring up one here. So this is probably something that all of you have seen before, and I'll see if I can zoom in a bit. I apologize. Zoom, there we go. Okay, so the area you want to go to now, and again, remember, this is only available and only applicable once this bulletin comes out, okay? So you're able to actually get detailed consumption of your home through here, okay? And it'll show you a little snippet, if you will, but where we want to actually go is this little area on the right-hand side called export data, okay? So once you're here, you put in your date range. And why this is super important here, everyone, is that under Canadian Electrical Code, I believe it's 81086, there is a little line, there's lots of little lines, I should say, but that states that to add further loads, such as EV charging to your home, if you're able to prove your actual usage of the last 12 months, that can be utilized as your baseline, if you will. Okay, so that's where we're coming from here. This bulletin coming out is showing what factors you need to put to this information, okay? So the date range is a year. We'll go back to about March 19th to about today. And what we need is hourly data, okay? So this is gonna give us all the data we need for the past year, every single hour. So the data that you get is every hour for a whole year. And what we'll do is we'll just graphize this. This is something that, you know, I'm not sure in the bulletin they will allow a homeowner to do, but it is simple enough to acquire in this way. And you can send it to any electrical contractor to analyze, such as ourselves. So I'm just going to put it in a different sheet here. There we go. So what we're seeing here is my own home past hourly usage for the whole year. And this is really important to note that what it's showing us is the kilowatt hour usage. So it's showing that hour period, how much you use within that hour. Now that's an average, okay? So there might be spikes up or lower, right? So the bulletin that will be coming out will state something to the effect that if you take your maximum used amount, let's call it 7 kilowatts, and you put a factor of about 25%, that is your actual load of your home that you can utilize to add further load to your building. Okay, what is that representing? That's only about 36 amps. We have 150 amp service. If we did what's called a calculated load, we would be just at our maximum amount. There's no way I can add an EV charger, right? I was thinking, well, there's options. I can put what's called a DCC unit that kind of measures my power, mitigates the power going to the charger, kind of chokes it off and whatnot. But through this saves me all that money.
And Lee, this kind of goes back to the long coffee we had a few months ago, where, you know, we're looking at, we have all these really efficient refrigerators and freezers and all those incandescent lights that, you know, you've got a string, 16 amp string for your upstairs lights, and those are all LED now. And, you know, let's stretch it out. You might be using 5 amps. So there's a whole lot of, you know, not used amperage on your panel. And this is exactly what you've done here is why, you know, we're a lot more efficient now.
Exactly. And that's what we're seeing in MERBs. For MERBs, we're seeing usually about 40% actively used at any one time, you know, at the highest point for MERBs. We have to put, you know, a safety factor of about 25 to 50% on that. So this bulletin, though, is specific to nothing but single family homes. That doesn't mean single families with suites. It's just one single family home with one family, not with extra suites attached and so on, okay? There may be more bulletins coming out after that. The problem is, and I completely understand when they've explained this to me, they said, well, you know, Lee, we just can't necessarily trust that this data is 100% accurate, right? Because BC Hydro has not stated that it is, right? There is this disconnect that we're trying to push BC Hydro as an industry to give us accurate data they are capable of, but they are not willing because there's just margins of error, right? That they don't want to be called back upon. But as an industry, we are pushing hydro because we're pointing to the government saying, your own people who create the policies that you have to abide by are pushing EV charging. We need this data. Okay, so this has come out of that. So great news for single family homeowners. This is easy to acquire. It is, once the bulletin comes out, read it carefully. I think they're going to put a margin of safety of 25%. It could be up to 50%. As you saw with this, even if it's 50%, we call it 45 amps for my home. I have still, you know, about 100 amps or so remaining. That's plenty for a 60 amp level 2 charger if I really wanted to, right? So, yeah, but before this bulletin, it would not have been possible to have that. All right. So that's all I wanted to share there. A couple other things I wanted to talk about is briefly is the townhome and MURBs. You know, what we do for that. We have to get a special BC Hydro load report. That's through a form that we help the client fill out and we process on their behalf. Kind of works the same situation, but it's a fine line. It's a weird situation where we can put a 50% margin of error on the data we get from hydro, and it still leaves plenty of room. But there is no official wording within the Canadian Electrical Code right now of that 50% or this margin, right? So it's just an interesting little thing that we're dealing with in the industry. I did just want to lastly talk about level 1 charging. We talked about on the break here with level 1 charging is completely fine. You know, I use level 1 charging in my home. I do most of my charging at work. We have a level 2 charger. I come into work most of the time, but I only plug in maybe once a week, right? That's all I need. And I travel extensively. I only have a Kona that has about 480 kilometers of range, but you know, what we're finding in industry that in our own discussions with people is that you use far less than you actually think you do. Now, the problem with level 1 charging, I'm just going to hit some highlights here. Completely fine for single family home, not a problem, right? If only you need a 7-8 kilometer charging your battery per hour, that's great. You know, you charge overnight and get 60 to 80 kilometers of charge. Awesome. No problem with that. You know, most people only need to travel 30 kilometers, you know, if that. The problem is with larger buildings. There's an article recently in City of Victoria or Times Colonist actually of someone in Vancouver, condo association in Vancouver, that had a new building. They installed 6 level 2 chargers, and unfortunately they also installed some level 1 charging for some people. So the people with electric vehicles are like, well, I'm just going to use a trickle charger and there's no fee. Well, there has to be some way that your strata is compensated for electricity. You know, nothing can be free because people who are not having electric vehicles, they do not want to subsidize your usage, obviously. So there is a cost associated to that. The problem with level 1, though, is that the cost of the installation is just as much or more. It's actually 2 times the amount of cost for level 1 charging from level 2 infrastructure, not the chargers on the infrastructure. It's about 2 times the cost, and it uses about 40% more power, the level 1 chargers, than a good designed level 2 load sharing system for MURBs. So that's a huge issue. If it's 40% or so more power that you have to allocate, your building may not have that. And there's demand charges and so on that you have to account for. With level 1, it's very, very expensive to also what we call demand charges, deal with mitigating those costs of demand charges. You can't necessarily control level 1 without just having a relay that just tells it to turn off or on, right? And of course, the monitoring of level 1 is not there as much as it can be with level 2 chargers. I'm not poo-pooing it at all. It's an option, and every building that we deal with, we give them all the options. It's up to the owners to decide X, Y, or Z. Not up to us. Yeah, and when it does come up to, like, if you included the rebates on the chargers themselves, though, when you have level 2 infrastructure and then the chargers, it ends up being about the same amount of money if the rebates were on the chargers. A lot of times, though, if you have a large building, you can't get all the rebates on chargers because there's a limited amount per year, right? With MERBs, you only get about $14,000 per year per strata. That'll only cover maybe 10, 11 chargers, but that amount is renewed every fiscal government year, every rebate year, right? So it's just something that we deal with our clients. They put in infrastructure, they buy maybe 10 chargers, and then next fiscal year, as April 1st, which is coming up, that's why it's very busy for us, they do another round of 10, up to 10 chargers. So that's about it. I think I've talked for about half an hour, so probably should quiet down now. Okay, any questions?
So we didn't have any. We had lots of great statements and in the chat, which are supportive of all this, which is quite awesome. But we don't have any outstanding questions. But we'll open the mic for a minute or two here and see if anybody does have a question. And if not, we'll end up going to a break before our next presentation. So
yeah, and maybe when people are considering, one thing I just saw in my notes here, I wanted to just touch upon, and maybe Chris, you can expand upon this. I know through my own connections with the people who write the Canadian Electrical Code and CSA, that they are changing rules right now coming up for battery storage systems. We don't know what those changes quite are yet. So I don't know if that's something that will affect. Again, when it comes to battery storage, it's kind of, we rely on the experts like Chris and their team to understand that, but we do keep an eye on what's coming down the pipe. So it's mainly to do with storage of the units themselves and make sure they have proper ventilation and whatnot, because they do off gas. And Chris, you can probably speak to that. But
we definitely have people that can speak to that. I myself am not up to date exactly on that, but for sure we've got some great engineers that could cover that. Yeah, obviously we were storing them in basements like power walls, and now we can't do that. So things like that are definitely changing the way we do things.
Yeah, if you had like a ventilation system though, right, or something.
Yeah, I'm not privy to that. I just know that I did a social media post on some power walls in a basement, and people were quick to point out that that wasn't allowed. So I checked into it, and it said that because that project was done under previous code, it was fine, but the code has since changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll hop in here for a quick one, Lee. Heat pumps. What impact do they have on your power panel?
Oh dear. Well, no, it's a great question. And when a lot of people, such as townhomes require a different animal of reviewing your power system. They kind of fall in between the single family and MERB. They're not covered by the EV Ready Plan design system. If you have private and garaged homes. And what we're finding is, whether it be townhome, single family home, or MERBs, whatever we do in regards to finding the actual usage of your building, your home, it's not just for the addition of EV charging. This number is potentially available for heat pump systems that you do not have that you need to add to your building. So it is rated under the Canadian Electrical Code as 100%, just like EV charging is. So if you have 70 amps available and you have a 40 amp charger, well, then you only have 30 amps available for a heat pump. It's just, it's XXY. Saying that, if you install a heat pump and you utilize it for a year within your building, because you need to prove with this information that I showed you of what you can gain from BC Hydro to acquire the information to coincide with the bulletin, you need to prove what has changed or not changed within your home. For example, if you have a 5-bedroom home and all of your children left 2 years ago, you had 3 children, your usage is different than if they came back because they couldn't make it in the world, and your usage is completely different. You have to prove these sort of things. So when it comes to heat pumps, what we're seeing is that it's just another factor that buildings are looking at to see, do we have the capacity as well for heat pumps? They usually work with a mechanical contractor to provide an estimate as to the future usage for large buildings or a single family home even. We just get the kilowatt usage that it would require and add it to the factors. What we are seeing with larger buildings, of course, is the push to remove natural gas systems from buildings coming up. It's not necessarily law yet, but we are seeing that whispering. For new buildings, obviously, they're trying to push it right out, of course. But for existing buildings, they may put more pressure upon them to remove their natural gas systems, which then needs to be a factor that we have to allow for EV charging as well.
Yeah, municipalities already have a bounty out for oil heat, and the next on the block is going to be methane natural gas. So we know it's coming. So that's why we asked the question about heat pumps. Well, that's great, Lee. Thanks very much. That was awesome. I've put your email into the chat. So if people have follow-on questions or want to get you out to have a look and see what you can do for them, it's there. Thanks again. That was awesome. And perhaps we should meet again once the new regulations are out and you can fill us in.
Sounds great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for the kind words, too.
And we're going to kick off now with Chris Palliser from Shift Energy. And Chris, come on in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Glenn, and thank you for having me, everybody. I just want to say I absolutely love the passion that you all share for EVs and renewable energy. It's contagious. It gets me excited. And so thank you very much for having me today to talk to you about solar. Who has solar? I know Glenn, obviously, and Jim. Do a lot of you already have solar or something you're curious about? I guess everyone's muted.
I think a lot of us here are very curious and just are looking for ways to argue ourselves into it.
Well, hopefully I can help you with that. Yeah, honestly, as Glenn and I have discussed, it's this crazy, easy, natural progression once you have an EV to look at solar, because all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got an EV. This is great. I'm doing my part. And then you're like, oh, but I guess I'm still paying someone else. There must be another way. And I was chatting with Jeff Kendrew from the solar Facebook group. And he said in his neighborhood, it's so funny because he'll look around and he'll see somebody get an EV. And then he just keeps his eye on that house. And sure enough, a year or two later, surprise, surprise, they're getting panels. Because my dream is to get an EV and solar, and then I'm going to get a big old bumper sticker that says driving on sunshine. So in due time. Yeah, I put a presentation together. I am going to distract you with some fancy slides. Just a quick background. I've been with Shift 9 months. I actually chose to go into solar. I was 20 years on air radio and television. And I hit 40, had a midlife crisis, and decided that I wanted to switch it up a little bit and not wake up at 4 a.m. anymore and do the morning show. And I chose to go into solar, and I reached out to Colin Strong, who's the founder and president of Shift. And he just said, hey, look, man, I'd love for you to come on and just engage with people about solar and get people excited about solar. And so that's kind of my role at Shift. So I jumped at the opportunity to get on here and speak with you guys. Shift Energy Group started in 2010. It's an island company. And in 2017, Shift focused on solar and energy storage and EVs, but we've actually since pulled back on EVs, and now we just focus on solar panels and installation and energy storage. We're a certified Tesla Powerwall installer. So that is our main focus, and we are on the island, and we've since expanded to Vancouver and also Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is pretty exciting. Yeah, and Halifax, Nova energy rates are about 16.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and they've just announced a 12%, almost 15% increase over the next 2 years. So a lot of people there's some mainstream hate against Nova Scotia Power, and a lot of people looking at solar and energy storage out there because they also have time of day, which is something energy storage can help with. So that's a little bit of background. I'm going to share my screen and dive into the presentation. It's 16, 17 slides. I'm going to try to move pretty quick. I asked Glenn to hit on what should I hit on, and he kind of mentioned a few things. So I'll talk about kind of the main things, and then obviously any questions, put them in the chat. I'll answer as I go. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to keep it exciting and engaging, and we'll keep it moving. So let me just fire this bad boy up here. All right, my friends, the Electric Vehicle Association, thank you very much for having me. There we go. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on solar growth in Canada. It's actually really interesting listening to Lee, because I feel like solar is probably about 4 or 5 years behind electric vehicles and all the rebates and everything that, everyone's all of a sudden moving. In the beginning, EVs, it was all early adopters getting EV charges. And now EVs are moving into the majority along that adoption curve. And so more and more people are getting EVs, and solar is about 5 years back. We're still in the early adopters, but man, it is growing fast. For example, Shift 2 years ago had about 10 staff members, and we now have 58. And as mentioned, we've expanded across Canada. So the growth is there. More and more people are looking at it. We're finding, of course, it's your energy independence seekers. It's your renewable lovers and environmentalists. Your techies are big into solar right now, as Glenn can attest. You get cool apps and things like that to check every night before you go to bed. And of course, because the cost of solar has come way down from where it was, it now makes sense as an investment as well. So we're kind of at this wonderful place where all of these different sectors are meeting, and it's all converging on solar. So just some stats I pulled. I can't explain compound annual growth rate in very much detail, but I do know it's good news that it is expected to register 11% during the forecasted few years. For example, 10 years ago, 13 years ago, installed capacity was 221 megawatts in Canada. And now we're upwards of 3,325 megawatts. China has 300 gigawatts. And that's just over 3 gigawatts in Canada. China, India, the rest of the world is so far ahead of us when it comes to solar. But again, that's why it's so exciting to be in Canada, because it's working for a lot of people. Provinces, Alberta's leading the way, Manitoba, Ontario, and BC is on the list, but we've got some catching up to do as well. And then right now it accounts for less than 1% of Canada's annual electricity production, but the growing is happening now, and that's going to skyrocket. Of course, with Canada's plan to achieve net zero and things such as that to replace the share of fossil fuels. It's only going to help solar. Now, some details on sunshine. Now, a lot of people say, wow, Chris, what are you talking about, man? There's way too much clouds, solar doesn't work here, dude. Well, it actually does. And what's really interesting is, as you can see on the left there for Vancouver Island, this is the average amount of sunshine yearly. Port Hardy, as you can see, Victoria, Sydney gets 2,109 hours. This is all average, of course, 308 days. Wow, Kelowna, that would be a great spot for solar because they get way more sun. Well, this was my surprise to me as well. We actually get more days of sunshine than Kelowna, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around. But the stats were there. So it's exciting nonetheless that we here in Victoria and Sydney do get, Victoria to Sydney get a lot. I actually lived in Vancouver for a few years. And before I moved there, I remember thinking like, oh, I grew up on the island. It's fine. I'm used to rain. And I got there. I said, whoa, no, they get a lot of rain. Photovoltaics. This is Solar 101. I know a few of you already know this stuff. It's super basic. Photovoltaics, photons in the sunlight come down and they hit your solar panel. And on a basic level, they cause the electrons to move up and down, party, left, right, positive to negative. And that movement, just like the movement on a wind turbine or the turbines in hydro, is what creates electricity. And that electricity is then captured by an electrical conductor sent to an inverter because it is direct current. And the inverter converts it to alternating current, which we use in our homes, and it goes into your panel and powers your heat pump, powers your EV, powers your coffee maker, all the things that we use. And of course, a lot of people get this one mixed up, kilowatts versus kilowatt hours. And I saw this the other day, and even for myself, it just made it nice and clear for me. Kilowatts is power at a time. Kilowatt hours is power over time. So you got a 1 kilowatt heater, that's 1 kilowatts. If it's running for an hour, that's 1 kilowatt hour. Now for the solar, because essentially how we size your solar system is say you need a 10 kilowatt solar system. So, or in this example, an 8 kilowatt solar array in ideal conditions might produce 8 kilowatts in direct sunlight at a time, but all day over time, it might produce 20 kilowatt hours. And I know just briefly chatting with Jim and Glenn, I think, Jim, you said yours is already at 50 kilowatt hours or something you produced today. Is that right?
Yeah, no, 5.
Oh, 5, sorry. Like 50, nice work. What a day.
Yeah, no, during the summer, it averages 50 a day. And, but right now, no.
Yeah.
And there's also the shoulder hours, sunrise, sunset, things back off a bit. So
Totally. Yeah, and as you go down your solar journey, you'll learn all about the shoulder hours and how we size systems to account for the shoulder hours and such as that. But that's a crash course in Solar 101 for sure. Photons in the sunlight move electrons to create electricity, and we size a solar system based on your consumption. Actually, Lee touched on it, which was wonderful. When we look to quote a system, we ask you to go to your BC Hydro account and tally up the consumption over the last year so that we can then base a solar array to cover your consumption and see how close to 100% of your consumption that we can cover. My understanding is, and you guys of all people would be able to correct me on this, I think we usually add about 3,000 kilowatt hours if somebody's going to get an EV, if they're planning on getting an EV, to that as well. But this is also how hydro controls, because basically what happens is they will, thanks to net metering, so we size your solar array to cover your house only, and they're trying to prevent people from covering their house and then some and trying to make money. So essentially what they do is they allow you to build a solar array that will cover your house and your needs. And thanks to net metering, that pans out, which I'll go on to in a little bit. And they will buy back power from you March 1st every year if you have excess solar energy at the end of the year. However, they buy it back at about 1/3 of what you pay for it. And that's their way of kind of controlling you and making sure you're not getting a massive system to cover power energy that you don't need. crash course, solar energy hits the panels, DC goes to your inverter. DC turns it to AC, it goes off to your smart meter, and it measures your electricity usage with inflow and outflow to allow you to build up kilowatt hour credits, which is net metering. So when you make excess solar energy, they will keep track of that in kilowatt hour credits, so that on those cloudy days, those winter days, you can withdraw those credits like out of a bank account and still use the solar energy you made on those sunny days. And then system monitoring, of course, we monitor all the systems we install. We have a 25-year production guarantee as well, with Shift, to make sure whatever we say your system's going to produce, it will produce that. And if it doesn't produce that, we will compensate you the difference. Or if there's a technical issue, we will fix it on us. Glenn, actually, or Jim, I actually have not seen a full power bill. So I'd actually love one of you guys to jump in and explain what you see. But this is an example of a net metering bill. Your electricity inflow, 786, electricity outflow, you can see it all here. And then they take the previous balance of your generation, they subtract that off that, and there's where it is. So Jim and Glenn, if you wouldn't mind jumping in and explaining a little bit about this, I'd appreciate that, because again, I haven't seen it.
What I see is my unit was put in June, and I didn't see a hydro bill until January of the following year. At that point, I get billed every 2 months. So I got one in January, I got one in March, and then nothing since. And that's the pattern. And that's mostly because I have baseboard heating.
Yeah, and the point is, you will still be charged for your grid connection every month and your billing, all that good stuff. But yeah, in production months, you will see your balance going up, the amount of kilowatts you're throwing into the system, and it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then you start drawing it back down in mid-October. And at the end of whatever your anniversary is, they'll then come up with, you use this much and you produce this much, therefore we're going to give you a bill for whatever the bonus or the deficit is.
Yeah, and is it anniversary? My understanding is it was March 1st every year, because that at the end of that, you're essentially gone through the winter and you've used everything.
Yeah, I think it depends. They will probably try and drive everybody to a common date, but yeah.
So it's net metering. It's the whole reason solar works in Canada, despite our cloudy, rainy days. In the spring and the summer, you make a ton of solar energy, and how it works is the solar energy you make goes into your home first. You use it to power your TV and dishwasher and all, charge your EVs, and whatever's left then goes into the grid. And as I mentioned, it's kept track as kilowatt hour credits. And then, yeah, when you're not producing as much because it's cloudy out, then you can draw on those credits. And if you're lucky, I'm very fortunate. My house, I don't have solar yet, but my house is south facing and I get sun all day. So it would actually 100% cover my electrical consumption, which is pretty exciting. So it doesn't always work that way, depending on the roof slope and things like that, which I'll get into. But it's pretty exciting to know that in the spring and summer, I would make enough electricity to cover everything I need for the year. So net metering spreads it out. That's the whole reason it works in Canada. That and the cost has come way down. Some benefits of going solar for you, of course, energy independence, not relying on the grid. You can earn credits, as we talked about, kilowatt hour credits, and annualized return. This is the investment part of solar right now, because the cost has come way down compared to a standard GIC. An annualized return for solar can be 6 to 10% over 25 years, which is pretty exciting for a lot of people. There's some people that just get it as an investment, and then they get to tell their friends, oh, I'm doing my part for the environment, and that just makes them look good. And you can sell your home for more. Generally, a solar system is going to add at least the cost of the system to your house, But as again, more and more people lean towards renewable energy, it's going to become a selling feature, and realtors are going to be highlighting a home that has a solar array on it. And I believe that's definitely going to help with resale. I don't see how it couldn't. And then, of course, a cleaner future. Just some stats, some numbers to look at for the environment. 8 solar panels generally covers about 40,000 kilometers of range in your EVs. 24 panels, and you're doing your part to remove 2 gas cars from the road each year. 16 panels is the equivalent to planting 46 trees. And I believe on our website, we have a little tally. Where our website has just over 300 projects on it, but we've done over 700 projects. Somewhere along the line before I showed up, they just stopped adding them to the website. So that's a fun project for me to do, is to slowly add our projects. Now, another reason a lot of people are going solar is the Greener Homes program. This is awesome. 5,000 grants up to $5,000. That's $1,000 per kilowatt. So if you got a 5 kilowatt solar system, you'd get $1,000. So there's $5,000 coming back to you. You also, the big step in this is you have to get an energy audit. Now, I'm not sure if you've done this, but if you want to use the program, you have to get an energy advisor in, and they essentially go through your house, do a blower test, check your insulation, all the things, and they come back and say, well, if you want to make your home more energy efficient, we recommend doing this with your windows, getting a heat pump, doing this with your insulation. And they do recommend solar, which is great for us. Now, it costs $600 to get that energy audit done. But again, the great thing is at the end of the project, you're going to get that $600 back as well. So, and then the big one, which came out last August, was a loan. This is an interest-free loan with a 10-year repayment payback period of 10 years. And it's up to $40,000. So I always use my home as an example because it's perfect. It's 100% offset, south-facing roof, and it costs about $25,000 for my array. So I love the math on this because right now my energy consumption, family of 4, detached house, is around $160 a month. So for me, $25,000 to get my solar array, then it is a reimbursement loan. That is key. So you have to pay everything up front and then you would get it back. So I would get the $5,000 rebate, the $600 for that energy audit, which leaves me with about $20,000. And I would put that $20,000 onto the 0% interest loan. And the repayment on that, which is not going to change for 10 years, is $166 a month. That's not changing for 10 years. And that's $16 a month more than I'm paying for hydro right now. So in 10 years, when my hydro is only going to go up, rates only are going to go up. And if I get my solar system, I'm just paying $166 for 10 years. And then after that 10 years, I've still got at least 15 years on my system of warranted coverage. And the systems last at least 30 years and beyond. So I love the math on that. And that's why I'm definitely going to be going solar when the time is right. I've just got to figure out paying for kids' braces in the near future first, and then I'm going to apply for that Greener Homes program. Things to note, just double checking myself here. Yeah, you got to pay for the project up front. And as I mentioned, first step is register for the program and get that energy audit. That is key. And you can't do any work until you've had that and they've given you the thumbs up. And then they actually do have to come in after and give the thumbs up that the project is done. Then they will submit their information. You submit your paid invoice to the government and they do their thing, and then they'll direct deposit the loan amount into your account. Rough costs of going solar right now, as you can see on the screen, smaller home, 4 to 5 kilowatts, 9 to 13. I would say the average home systems that we do at Shift are the 7 to 10 kilowatt systems. And that's where mine came in. I think mine was about a 9.8, might even be a 10. So I was right around that peak 24, 25,000, and then it goes up from there. Of course, unfortunately, just like everything in the world, including the cauliflower at my grocery store, costs due to inflation are creeping up a little bit as well. So it's nice that there's a little up to 40K room on that loan, that's for sure. Some ways to save, consume less energy. I did a podcast with Steve Unger, who's our head engineer, and we talked about how a lot of people just get a solar array to cover their energy use. They don't even think about consuming less energy and then requiring a smaller solar array. It was called "What is the Real Cost of Energy?" and we got real deep on this episode if you want to check it out. Consume less energy, maximize capacity on a single roof portion, because every time you put another array on another side of your roof, of course, that just adds to the cost. Another suggestion was use powered outbuildings. Maybe you have a garage or something. That would be a perfect spot. And another big tip is go solar when you're replacing your roof. Because, you know, if your roof is due in 5 years, you're just going to have to pull your panels off and fix your roof and go put them back on. So it's always wise to look at the age of your roof and consider the timing of when you're going to go solar. Some variables, lots of variables in those quotes, and lots of things can change how much production you can get. When it comes to equipment, inverters, panels, mounting hardware, amount of wire, is it a long run to go to your panel, things like that. Roof orientation, south is ideal. You're going to get that sunshine all day. And of course, east and west work as well. East in the morning, west in the afternoon. Obstructions, trees and buildings, you don't want shade on those panels. And a roof design, and this is kind of that part I mentioned about, you want to try and keep, you know, one solar array if you can, otherwise the cost does start to creep up. So peaks and valleys, dormers, plumbing stacks, and skylights. And this is an interesting one as well, because in Victoria we have a lot of older homes. My home is 100 amp service and 100 amp bus bar. And you can usually find this stuff written on your panel somewhere. But for example, if you have 100 amp service and 100 amp bus bar, you can do 12 panels, and that's the max. That's, excuse me, a 20 amp solar breaker. However, if you have a 125 amp bus bar, so even if you got 100 amp service, your bus bar behind there where all your breakers are plugging into, it might be 125 amps. And if that's the case, all of a sudden you can get 30 panels. There's a bus bar formula that we do, and we essentially take the bus bar rating, multiply it by 1.25 or 125%, and then subtract your service. And that leaves you with how much room you have for solar. So if you have a 200 amp service, you can get 30 panels, but if you have a 225 amp bus bar, all of a sudden you're up to 48 panels, if that's what you need to power your life. So I would need to upgrade my panel. I would get Edwards Electric in and do a panel upgrade to make sure that you can do a panel swap, which means you can just up the bus bar. But because of, we have dreams of getting a hot tub and things like that, and 100 amp service just isn't cutting it. And of course, EVs. So we would have to do a panel upgrade. And then roof type, we install solar on shingles, asphalt shingles, metal, standing, corrugated, torch on flat, TPO flat, tile, Spanish and concrete tile. There's two things that we don't do, and that's cedar shake, because we just find that the cedar shingles, they just split apart every time we're trying to mount, and we don't do metal shingles either. All right, return on investment. This is an example of what you would see on your proposal. This is somebody's proposal that I grabbed just for a slide here. You can see that their system size is a 9 kilowatt system, so that is the size. And the projected annual production would be 10,025 kilowatt hours over the year. And again, we stand by that production. If your system does not meet that production, we will compensate you the difference or make it right if it's a technical issue. And that's going to offset this person's consumption by 68%. So we've given an example with a 30-year average. Without solar, they're going to pay $2,800. With solar, they're going to pay $1,200. And that makes the annual return 7.98%. over 30 years, about 50,000 bucks. And you can see that after about, what's that, year 12, 13, 12, you're going to start to make money. Crash course in that return on investment. When it comes to equipment right now, we're actually using AP system inverters. We use a lot of Longy solar panels. So again, this is from someone's proposal. We proposed 20 Longy solar panels, 10 AP system inverters, one micro inverter does 2 panels. I should say there's a few different types. There's string inverters or micro inverters, and essentially that is, or solar edge is another one. So you can have every solar panel can be connected in a string, and they all go to one big inverter. And it might be next to your panel, might be on the side of your house. And then that converts it from DC to AC. Or you can do micro inverters, which the conversion from DC to AC happens on the roof under the panels. And then all you have going from the panels at that point is AC going into your breaker panel. And there's the racking, Schletter rails, components, mounting assembly. We have lots of other options, N-phase, solar edge. We do black on black. A lot of people are liking the look of the black on black solar panels. Whatever the project calls for. And I do have some notes as well if you have more questions about that on what we use and why we're using AP systems now. Install timeline. This was something Glenn was curious about because, you know, as more and more projects come up, we can't hire people fast enough to complete them. So right now for Shift in Victoria, you know, if you got your quote next week and you wanted your solar system in, now would be a great time, to be honest with you, to maximize that production in the spring and summer. If you didn't need the Greener Homes loan or anything like that, it would be about 2 months, 2.5 months from deposit to the install. Now with the Greener Homes program, because as we all know, the government doesn't move too fast, you'd have to add a couple of months for that, all of the approvals and the paperwork from that. So we're up to 4 or 5 months. However, we just had a meeting last week and those times are actually coming way down. Somebody told me 2 weeks they got approval on their Greener Homes loan, which is wonderful. So all of a sudden you're back down to that 2.5 month range. And Nanaimo, the Lower Mainland in Nova Scotia, because they actually require building permits for us to install solar, that adds 2 or 3 months. And then if you add the Greener Homes program on top of that, they're looking at 5-6 months. So we're pretty lucky that there's no building permits required here in Victoria. But yeah, like I mentioned, in Nanaimo and further up island, that does add a little bit of time. We also do energy storage, Tesla Powerwall. We do other types of batteries as well. This is kind of the flashy one. For you Tesla owners, if you really want to, make the whole system all look super nice, then you get a nice little Tesla Powerwall in there. They're right now just under $11,000. That's just for the Powerwall itself. And then there's some estimated costs as well, which bring the total to around 20,000 bucks to get a Tesla Powerwall in. And that provides 13.5 kilowatt hours. So it's not a lot. It depends how you use it. It was put to me, it's kind of like a hot water tank. It depends on how much, if you're having a huge 3 baths in a row, well, then you're going to be out in 10 minutes. But if you have a little quick shower here and there, well, then you can make it last for as long as you need to. So yeah, 13.5 kilowatt hours is what that's going to hold, 20,000 bucks to install. Because of net metering though, a lot of people are just getting the solar array, which makes sense. Because if you got 20,000 bucks for your solar array and you want a battery, well, all of a sudden you're up to $40,000. And batteries, because if you're tied to the grid and you don't have a power outage, there's no need for a battery. We install batteries in off-grid or in time of day places, because then you can use your battery when it's most expensive to use power from the utility and charge it up at night when it costs less. So like I said, in Nova Scotia and places like that. So yeah, there's some prices. Sorry if I'm moving too fast. We can have a great discussion and you can really test my knowledge. This is something we're really excited about at Shift here, because the future of solar is going to be builded integrated photovoltaics. and that is they will be building homes with a way to produce their own energy. In California, I believe they just passed this into law, and we're about 7-8 years behind California in terms of solar. So in California, you cannot build a home without it having some sort of way to produce its own energy. And of course, a lot of them are looking at solar. And so Shift is pretty proud to be ahead of the game. Colin, our founder, is a real forward-thinking, progressive man. And he this is a product called Roofit Solar, and it comes from Estonia, and it is a metal roof with solar built in. And this is Colin's house, actually, in Nanaimo. And it is the first building in North America to have this product on it. And you can see the product right here. This is all solar, and it installs just like a metal roof, standing seam metal roof. But it's 135 watts, 165 watts per panel. And it's hard to see, but they're about 5 feet long. So there's, 5 panels here or something. But it looks absolutely beautiful. So a lot of people, my wife included, sometimes isn't quite sold because of the aesthetics of solar. I'm all about the production and clearing that power bill. But she's like, and we have a low rancher home in Glanford area in Victoria. And she's like, well, I don't know, driving up to our cute little house, if we see solar panels, I don't know. I like the black on black, but she saw this and she thought, okay, fine. Yeah, you can do solar, honey. It's a beautiful product. It is expensive. Right now it's around, I want to say $65 a square foot. So it is a premium. You pay for that beauty for sure. We hope that it will come down in the near future. That's our plan. But right now it is a premium product. And we see it going on a lot of new builds more so than retrofitting your current house. But yeah, that's roofit.solar by Shift. We're pretty excited about that. This is just a project downtown, the largest solar array in Victoria that we installed in October. I learned how to fly a drone with my growth at Shift. And so I put together this little drone video of this install. 251 solar panels, and it's right downtown, as you can see behind the Parliament buildings on the Ministry of Environment building. It's Jal Properties is the developer. They're the ones that hired us to install it. It just happens to be the home of the Ministry of Environment. That's downtown, as you can see, just behind the legislature. Largest solar array in Victoria. The Central Saanich Fire Hall does have a slightly bigger one. But we're in chat in talks right now with somebody else in Victoria to do one bigger than that, which we're very excited about. And we actually did one we just finished an install. I don't have video. It's not super public, but we just finished the install for a warehouse in Delta, a brand new warehouse in Delta for a company called Lululemon. You might be familiar with them. And we have installed the largest rooftop solar array in British Columbia on the roof of that building. And it's in the logo. It's the Lululemon logo in solar panels, which we're really excited to go public with. And it's kind of public now because when you fly in and out of Vancouver, you can see it. It says Lululemon in solar panels right on the roof, but we're really, really excited about that one. I'm right near the end here, my friends. Just wanted to chat about the solar referral program. Basically, if you refer us, you get $250, $500 for your second referral, and $750 for your third or more referrals. So Glenn and Jim, you already have solar from us, so feel free to share the word and we'll give you some cash. And you can sign up for it there at the website. Thank you very much, my friends. I felt like I moved really fast. I will stop sharing and let's have a chat here. Pause share. There we go. I think I paused it. Stop share.
Okay, Heather, do you want to start with the questions
Yeah.
back to Bill's
Sure,
first question?
I'll just start where the statements finish and I'll go to the questions. Jim and Paul from Maple Bay, what if we don't have a year with a new build? I'm not quite
I
sure.
think that was part of the questions for Lee.
Was that for Lee?
Yeah.
Was it 212? Okay, it might have been though.
No, actually, it was for the hydro rates, because you had to have a year's worth of hydro rates to get the assessment
Right.
Right.
approved for the BC Energy or the energy grants.
Yeah, I don't think you need it to get the grants. You need it for a proposal. However, that being said, we do proposals for new builds all the time, just based on the specs for the building. We can usually gauge it pretty well. It's just if you're a new user, it makes it a lot easier for us to do, because we can say, okay, yeah, look, here we go. We can cover 70% of your current usage. Otherwise, we've gotten pretty good at ballparking it based off the size of the house and the panel and things going into the house and things like that, if that answers your question.
Yeah,
Could
that's
definitely be
great. I put in a request to shift for a quote.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Oh.
excited.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, you did that recently?
Just while you were chatting.
Oh, no way. Oh,
The
that's
0%
wonderful.
interest rate is what kicked it over, because of course, new build, all these expenses and everything else. But the building, I talked to Steve Unger, the building is ready for solar. It's got the conduit done for it. So
Great.
we were just waiting for something like 0% interest.
Totally. Yeah, man. So, and what's great about that too is that solar for a long time was kind of accessible to those who could afford it. That's just how it was. A lot of people 55 plus that thought, okay, I got some money, now's the time to invest it in my home and do my part for the environment or make a good investment. But thanks to this Greener Homes program, it's opening the door for a lot of people, myself included, the young families that want to do their part, but don't have the money up front. And so all of a sudden now, my wife and I can pay for braces and soccer practice and all that. And then we get this nice Greener Homes loan, and it's not going to change, which is my favorite part. You did mention Solar Ready, which I just did a podcast on it. And this is actually something worth touching on, because in the Saanich municipality, my understanding is that for a home to be solar ready, for a developer or builder to say, yep, this home is solar ready, all they need to do is to run a conduit from the attic down to the main floor of the house. And then they can check that box. Unfortunately, what's happening is a lot of people are like, oh, great, solar ready. They go in, and then we come in and we say, this conduit doesn't go anywhere near your panel, so we have to run wires to your panel. Or maybe we go in, and in the roof, they've got plumbing stacks and skylights and everything on that south facing portion where we could have put panels for wonderful energy production.
So we took pictures of the roof while it was being built, the attic space, and where the conduit ends.
Perfect.
And so Steve was really good about suggesting these things in a previous meet. So we're
He's
really
the guy on the
hoping it's
podcast, so you literally
Yeah.
went to the right person. He's
So
the
we're
guy that told me
hopeful.
all these things to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
He's also the one that said to us that, oh, you're getting a legal suite put in your place, get an EV charger installed as well. Get it done before the house is finished being built, because then
Perfect.
you don't have to worry about it. So we did that as well. So he's been absolutely just spot on with all of his suggestions. And the builder was just gobsmacked about some of the things we asked for, but it was a really good fit for us and where we want to go.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that's another thing, actually. If you're looking at building a new home, I heard this, and again, I'm pretty sure this was from Steve. When you're building your home, your builder might say to you, 200 amp service. Yep, we got a 200 amp bus bar. You're fine. And if you say, well, actually, no, we want a 225 amp bus bar, they might say to you, well, that's going to cost you an extra couple $100, and just because they're lazy and they don't want to source it and do it and all that. But if you get a 225, all of a sudden it just opens the door so much more to get more solar, more panels if you need it.
And
So
we can use the suites capacity as part of the panels, according to Steve. So they
perfect.
can bundle both of them, and we can have it all come into quote our account.
That's great. Yeah, it's amazing how you can save yourself by paying $100 during the build. you can save yourself $1,000 if and when shift comes to install, for sure. So that's great. And Steve's the go-to guy.
And Chris, before we get too far ahead, you could send a referral check for Jill and Paul to VicEVA, because
Well, actually, you kind of have to send it to Dave and Carol Mallet
oh, okay.
if you're going to do it. But if not, if they don't want the money, then we're happy to send it to VicEVA, because they are responsible for the EV card that we got, and they're responsible for the advice that we got from Shift. So it's all a good relationship.
Awesome. And like I said off the top, honestly, it's such a, I'm really enjoying getting to know Glenn and everyone, because they all just go together. They're peas in a pod, you know what I mean? And so it's been pretty fun to just have these conversations. And yeah, at the end of the day, it just makes sense. And that's why, like, sometimes I feel like a sales guy, but I'm just an enthusiastic guy about something that makes sense. I'm not even a sales guy. I'm on the marketing side. I just like telling people about, you know, net metering and the greener homes loan, because all of a sudden when you crunch the numbers, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, we have a few more questions, Chris.
For sure.
Bill, to everyone, he's got a couple of questions. He says, what are you doing for each new system you put in to ensure the customer knows they have to clean the panels twice a year?
Like, what are we doing about talking about maintenance?
I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the exciting thing is that rain, for the most part, we say cleans the panels. If you do feel the need to clean, no pressure washing is the message. Obviously, just a little bit of soap, even just a damp bottle of water. Yeah, I don't know if we have any instructions, so to say.
The only instructions I got were just let rainwater do it.
Yeah, and that's truly what we say here on the West Coast. The rain will, you know, we do not encourage you going up onto your roof and trying to clean them. The rain will take care of it. That's the overall message. And then if you really feel the need to, maybe it's really dusty in the summer. We've had a month of dry weather and they're getting a little dusty. Then yeah, just a simple garden hose if you want, or there's a post on social media about this recently. But it's never really an issue here on the West Coast in terms of people having to go up and clean them.
And Bill also asks, he says, my panel upgrade was $3,500. Do you know on average what Edwards is charging? Lastly, BC Hydro charged me $900 to turn off power to allow you folks to tie into the smart meter. Are they still charging that fee?
Good questions. If you could just break them down one at a time, and I'll do my best.
Okay, the first one was, do you know on average what Edwards is charging for panel upgrade? You said his was $3,500.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I can't speak, unfortunately, to exact numbers. That's not my department, unfortunately.
And also that $900 to turn off the power by Hydro, will they still be charging that fee?
Good question. I can get the answer for you. Unfortunately, I can't give it at the moment.
Okay, Mike
That's
also.
our solar designers and the guys pricing all those upgrades.
Right.
That would be their department.
Chris,
Mike,
I'll just say that I have a smart meter, and we didn't pay anything to Hydro.
okay, thanks, Jim. Mike asks, can I install a solar that will provide power during a grid outage? I've been told I can't.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. You can't. So what happens in the event of a power outage is it disconnects your solar system. It will no longer send power to the grid because if the power's out, they're going to be working on the lines. And if we're sending our beautiful sunny solar array, we're going to zap them. So it automatically disengages from the grid. The only way you could actually use solar in a power outage, it seems weird, but if you had a battery, because again, we're using the grid instead of a battery. So when the grid goes down, we can't use the solar. But if we had a battery, then the solar would feed the battery. We would use the battery to power our house. So yeah, unfortunately, if you're grid tied only and the power is out, it will kill the solar array. So we don't zap anybody.
Next question from Bill again is, do you recommend getting a new roof to last 25 years plus prior to putting up a new solar panel? And what is the approximate cost of temporary off solar for an existing roof to put on a new roof later?
Yeah, I'm just reading it. I mean, definitely, yeah, a new roof lasting 25 years plus before you do your solar panels would be wonderful, because then you're never going to have to touch your roof. You just put your panels on, sit back, relax, and have a margarita and enjoy that solar production. The approximate cost to to take the solar off, and then, is that what the question is? Approximate cost to temporary take off solar for an existing roof to put a new roof on later?
I guess so. He doesn't seem to be here anymore, so I'm not
Oh, I
sure.
lost them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I knew. That's a good question. I don't have the cost of that. We will do that for sure. We'll come and take them off and let you do your roof and then put them back on. Unfortunately,
And sorry, excuse me. Anne asks, we occasionally have big hailstorms. What damages can we be expected?
they're rated for, I think it's about 165 kilometers per hour impact. So hail's not going to bust your solar panels. It's going to take a lot more than hail to do that. We wouldn't be in business very long if hail did damage them. They're definitely constructed well to handle that. And Jim and Glenn, I don't think you had any damage, have you?
No.
No.
And I think it can help you with the with the cost of if you have to temporarily take them off. One of my neighbors did a renovation a year ago and needed to move the panels from the roof because the roof was being extended. And he and it took us about 2 hours to take them down, because you just unplug them and then and then put them back another 2 hours. So that was it. And
oh, there you go. Did you remove the rails then too?
yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I'd be curious. My only thought on that is, if you're doing it yourself, I wonder if that would change the shift warranty.
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's just my only thought from a business standpoint on that one. But
Right. It wasn't I don't think Shift had done the original installation. It was done like 10
gotcha.
years.
For sure.
And our last question from Barb. We looked at getting the Greener Homes grant or loan, but could not get them because we already had a grant for our heat pump and because the auditor did not recommend solar, apparently because in BC we have too much hydropower. Note also that the energy audit was about $1,000.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm only going off what I know, and I was chatting with Dan from Getz Energy. And it's about $600. I know in Vancouver it was about $800. I haven't heard it being 1,000. And then, yeah, interesting point about you already had the heat pump. So if you already used the rebate, maybe that wouldn't work. And I have not met myself an auditor that hasn't recommended solar. But the thing is, each energy audit is, my understanding is each energy auditor is kind of their own business.
Go ahead, Barbara, you had something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it surprised us because, of course, we originally got the energy audit specifically because we were getting the heat pump. So then when we wanted to apply to get the loan for the solar installation, they said, well, you need an energy audit. We said, well, we already had one. And when we went back to look at it, they hadn't recommended solar. So it would have meant getting another energy audit to see if they might recommend solar. But when we talked, you talked to him, didn't you? And he said it was because BC already has so much hydro, so it's considered green power. So they don't particularly want to give us any benefits when we already have what they consider green power. So, I mean, that's the federal.
Yeah, I'll stick my oar in here and say that, you know, as Chris was saying, each of these guys is an independent person. And if you've already got sort of the max you can get from the federal program, then there's no advantage to them coming back to do anything, because you're not going to get reimbursed for a second audit and you're not going to get any money from the feds. So it's probably a short form way of him not doing anything because it wasn't going to benefit him. Just my supposition.
Yeah, get a second opinion.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, like I said, Dan from Getz Energy has been amazing. So if you wanted to chat with him, I'm sure he would even let you just pick his brain, honestly, and just see what's going on with that. Because yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure about the rebates too. That's interesting. If you've used it for the heat pump, does that take that up? The bonus is that you've got this Greener Homes loan available now.
No,
Well, that's what we thought we could
No.
use, but then they said because he never recommended solar with the audit, we couldn't get the loan either.
well, it wasn't that. If we couldn't get a grant, then we couldn't apply for an interest-free loan. And
Huh.
what
When
Greener
was
Homes-
this?
What Greener Homes told us was the only way around it is to sell your house and start over again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any answers for you other than what Jim suggested, and just get a second opinion. And like I said, I can pass you on to Dan's email
And
if you want me to do
I'll stick my R in again here. As somebody who always seems to be doing things long before their incentives, I can tell you that it's still worth doing it regardless. So I paid the full freight for my solar system. My levelized cost of energy over the next 30 years is 7 cents a kilowatt. So I'm already, 30% below step one BC Hydro rates. So
We're gonna be dead in 30 years, so
your house won't.
we don't
Your house won't.
think that far out, but
Well, the other thing is we have to put a new roof on it, which because of the design of our roof is extremely expensive. So,
step by step,
We-
we still may do it. We still may do it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's still adding value to your home.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. But you got to have the bucks up front.
It's
Yeah,
like
that-
I converted a house from oil heat to electric baseboard hot water, and I moved up before I got the payback on. Well, no, I got a payback when I sold the house,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I knew I left a house that was much better for everybody
yeah,
than the one I moved into in 2000.
yeah, and we probably will eventually do it. It's just, it slowed everything down because when we found out, it wasn't so bad not getting the grant, but when we couldn't get the loan either, we said,
Yeah,
well, that would have helped us quite a bit.
yeah. I'll give you Dan's email,
Okay,
And,
thanks.
uh,
We'll check
and
it out.
hopefully he can help you out. And I could be wrong, maybe for some weird reason it doesn't work, but I do find that funny because all the energy auditors that I've met, they add solar as well, which is why we're spending money advertising it.
And
Okay.
I'll add something to this related to the Greener Homes thing. I was the first, by my knowledge, the first shift customer to apply. I was already in line to get an installation, and they called and said, there's this new program, do you want to get involved with it? And I did. And Greener Homes was a nightmare for me. Because their website didn't work, you'd send them files, they didn't know where they were, all of that kind of stuff. I waited 14 months before I got the rebate.
Wow.
What made it happen was I finally called or sent an email to the environmental critics of all of the political parties, and it got done within 24 hours. So I would say if they're telling you that the whole point of the program is to upgrade what people have, so they've got the energy savings, and there's no reason why, because you've got a heat pump, you can't do solar. It just makes no sense at all. It would be like saying, well, we can't do your windows, and it just doesn't make any sense. So call them back, ask them where this comes from. You won't get a straight answer, I'm pretty sure, but then get in touch with your MP or the environmental critics or the natural resources critic for whoever, and I guarantee you will get an answer that's in your favor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Chris, can you put your contacts into the
For sure.
chat? And then anybody who's got further questions can catch up to you one-on-one.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, Barbara, if you want to just send me an email, that's Chris Palliser from Ship. Just send me an email and I'll introduce you to Dan. I'll just say, hey, here's my friend Barbara, and she just has a few questions, and maybe he can help you out and point you in the right direction. I see Anne's note there about those are, geez, 3 5/8 inches. Whew. I did some math on that hailstorm and on that 165 kilometers per hour, actually, because a lot of people want to know, will hail damage my solar panels? And makes sense. And I think the largest hailstone ever to fall was almost 8 inches. I don't even think that's a stone at that point. And it impacted, they figure, whoever was there to measure, I don't know how it works, but it said it hit something at like 170 kilometers per hour. So I was like, okay, I feel pretty good that the largest hailstone ever would have maybe damaged your solar panel, but anything smaller than 8 inches should be okay. Now, don't hold me to it if a 1-inch stone does some damage, but.
Well, if you're selling well in Saskatchewan, that means they're probably not doing that much damage.
Oh, there you go. Yes, the prairie provinces are massive because actually solar is more efficient in Canada than in Hawaii or Mexico or Arizona, because solar panels are just like any electronic device. They work better when they're cooler. They're more energy efficient when they're cooler. The difference is a panel would produce more in Mexico because they're just getting more sunshine. But if you did a Canada panel versus a Mexico panel in direct sunlight, the Canadian one is probably going to be more efficient.
Right on. Well, thanks, Chris. That was awesome.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I feel like I went on too long. That was my first presentation for you guys. I'm going to hopefully use this. Any feedback quickly, actually, for me, so as I go forward and use this presentation.
I think it checked all the boxes and is good for neophytes as well as experienced people. So no, that's pretty awesome.
Okay, well, I really appreciate that, guys. And Glenn, thanks for having me and inviting me out, and we'll get you on the podcast again. Check out Glenn's episode if you haven't already.
Okay, so Victoria Electric Vehicle Association, we were contacted by some of our concerned members about recent revelations regarding the inclusion of cobalt in electric vehicle batteries. However, these revelations are not recent, as this issue goes back to the early days of EV uptake in 2014. Regardless, we felt it was time to re-examine cobalt specifically and EV batteries in general. So, cobalt has many uses in modern economies, everything from making durable metals in internal combustion engines, gas turbines, paints, medicines such as vitamin B12, and consumer electronics batteries and EV batteries. It even has a catalyst role in removing sulfur from diesel and gasoline during refining. In certain types of EV batteries, its presence prevents certain chemistries from rapid oxidization, also known as fire. That's in nickel, cobalt, magnesium, and nickel, cobalt, aluminum batteries. So, cobalt can be found in significant quantities in about 10 countries around the world, producing about 18% of global output. And then the rest of the world picks up the other 12% to come to a total of 30% of global production. But the vast majority, 70%, comes from one country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. It should be noted that almost all of copper's land-based deposits are found in combination with nickel or copper. So it's, in fact, in 2020, only about 14% of global cobalt was not produced as a byproduct of nickel, copper, or platinum group metals production. While 80% of cobalt mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo is done on an industrial scale, about 20% comes from artisanal sources. Artisanal sources are freelance miners working outside of industrial mine sites, sometimes in the centers of villages or raking through old mine tailings to find cobalt ore. A recent book, which has received much press attention, is Cobalt Red. This book echoes similar concerns raised in 2014, and while researched some years ago, it generally echoes the Amnesty International report of 2016. Their report estimated that up to 15% of artisanal miners could be children, working at the surface, washing, cleaning, hauling cobalt ore, and earning somewhere between $1 to $2 a day for their families. Assuming they can work as hard as adult miners means their contribution to the total tonnage could be up to 3.9 thousand tons annually. Impacts of that work can lead to lung ailments, dermatitis, and death for adults in mine collapses, which could number in the hundreds over a decade. In a country where war, disease, and strife have made life difficult at best, these pop-up mines are both hazards as well as income to otherwise destitute families. The DRC government is far from effective in protecting artisanal miners, but has started programs to regulate freelance miner safety, drop child labor, while recognizing the importance of income to this group. We await further Amnesty International reports on this deplorable situation. So what I have here, the two tables you see here, you can see are the EV uptake since 2013 compared with cobalt production over the same period. Note that while EV production between 2018 and 2022 increased over 500%, while cobalt production increased only 28%. This is interesting that the two trends are not matched. As seen previously, battery compositions containing cobalt make up 34% of the market between EVs, while battery storage and consumer electronics have 31%. However, the cost of cobalt and the social stigma associated with have led EV manufacturers to seek cobalt-free chemistries, the largest of which are lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, batteries. As of 2022, 31% of EVs produced were without cobalt, with BYD and Tesla being the major leaders in that field, as well as all of them reducing the amount of cobalt used per kilowatt hour of NCM and NCA batteries. This is what has decoupled EV and cobalt production. As a side note, there are 19 million EVs on the planet, plus another 8 million plug-in hybrids running around as of the end of 2022. Going forward, battery recycling companies like Li-Cycle and Redwood Materials are ramping up their efforts with consumer electronics batteries and the early first-generation EV batteries, and they're showing a 97% recovery of battery materials. Since the fairly high cobalt content lithium-ion batteries started in the 90s, that means there are 30 years of batteries available to recycle and go into the next generation of low to no cobalt content EV batteries. This will mean that EV demand for new cobalt may disappear altogether. Globally, 2/3 of air pollution is from the extraction, refining, transport, and burning of fossil fuels and vehicles. That results in between 7 and 8 million deaths per year, 10,000 of those in Canada alone. The lingering nature of those deaths and the impacts on our families and healthcare system total $90 billion every year to Canada. A situation about cobalt in 69% of batteries, but dropping, is not good. The road to EV-only transportation leads to the avoidance of much global suffering, which is seemingly accepted with the fossil fuel status quo. Global economies are on the road towards a better future, but there are vast vested interests in the fossil fuel status quo. They will use their money to misrepresent reality and show shades towards better, cleaner, safer replacements for their products. Major cobalt users continue to explore replacements for cobalt in many processes with success. They've had programs to reduce artisanal content in the flow, of which child labor may still be an unacceptable 3%. However, in the context of global harm, this concern must be weighed against the reality that shifting transportation to battery electric vehicles will save millions of lives annually. Regardless, we in the EV world will take fresh trouble for granted and press onward, knowing we work towards a bright future. That's all I got. Any questions?
it is something that people are always asking about. And it is something I think we all care about because, you know, we're trying to improve things on the planet, not make them worse for anybody. So, but I think it's interesting that ultimately, I think cobalt is not going to be needed to be mined very much in the future unless they come up with some other use for it. So that's
Yeah, and it is interesting that you know, if you looked at 1990 and see what percentage of cobalt was being used for things, you know, there would have been vastly more towards desulfurization, metals for internal combustion engines, all those things, and batteries wouldn't have been part of it, right?
Yeah.
So that's never mentioned. And it's really interesting, in that I'm sure this this author, who, you know, he's done other books on human slavery around the planet. I'm sure he's very, you know, focused on that, as somebody should be. And but I mean, it also seems to be pitched at one part of the, you know, emerging economies rather than the status quo, and that's just not honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also interesting. You know, we all know that the internal combustion engine has caused so many health problems for millions of people, and continues to do so. So, you know, there's nobody ever sort of makes a big fuss about that. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody, because there are, you know, people in the health field particularly who are drawing attention to that and actually using that as another argument for cleaner energy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to leave you now. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you, all you folks. By the way, I'm from Nanaimo, and I'm with the Mid-Vancouver Island Electric Vehicle Association, as is my husband, who is a little out of camera range right at the moment. And so we're, Glenn and Jim, we know, been very helpful to us. So nice to be part of one of your presentations today.
Great, thanks for doing it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Stefan. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Oh, amazing. Zoom just doesn't work on my Ubuntu computer at all. Yeah, a couple comments. First thing on the Cobalt thing, I've been following this pretty closely. A couple comments I just wanted to make on this. The devil's advocate on this, I think the reason why there's more scrutiny placed on Cobalt in the EVs is because supposedly the green economy is clean and, you know, is a more responsible industry. So I think there's a higher bar that's placed on the green economy and EVs and things like that. And then people can point and say, oh, well, look at this, you know, it's just as bad as, you know, the fossil industry or something like that, which again, I think is a bit of a red herring. And then the thing is that there is a big push in the industry to get away from, basically to get away from any exotic minerals like cobalt. And, you know, there's also an issue with like windmill turbines have lots of those, what do they call them? Special metals. I can't think of the name of them, but they're trying, I think Vestas. Rare earths, thank you. Vestas is actually working on creating a turbine that has no rare earths in it. It's using all kind of common minerals. So, I mean, I think there's this push as all of these industries get more mature and the volumes get bigger and bigger. There's a push to try to remove all of these kind of special, you know, specialty minerals out of the supply chain of all these different industries that we have. So, one other comment I wanted to make about the solar. Being someone who's from Boston, and my parents who live in the Boston suburbs currently are paying about 35 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity in the Boston area, and they just put a solar array on their roof. It's a 5 kilowatt system that cost them about 25 grand, which is about twice the price of what you would pay for that system in Canada, actually. That system at 25 grand will pay for itself in 12 years with 35 cents an hour electricity. The big issue I see, and I don't know if this is still true, but BC Hydro is very cheap. I mean, it's 12, I think we're up to 12, 13, maybe 14 cents a kilowatt hour. That is less than half than what people in expensive parts of North America are paying. And that means that solar systems, as far as I understand, take 25 to 30 years to pay off. And is that still true, or has that number changed?
I'll
Yeah.
give it to you. So remember, I'm the guy who didn't get any incentives.
Okay.
So what I did is I looked at what my levelized cost of energy that you could do to any system, your capital costs, your operations and maintenance costs, your retirement costs. You stack all those together over the expected lifetime and how much electricity you're going to get from the system, and so you divide that in by the kilowatt hours. You now know what your levelized cost of energy is. I went for 30 years on the calculation because it's after 30 years that they start to lose 1% of production per year.
Sure.
So I did all that out, and that's where I came out to, even though step 1 in BC is 9.4 cents rounded and 14 cents for step 2 rounded, I'm paying 7 cents a kilowatt for every kilowatt I bring off my roof. I'm already 30% less. So even on cheap BC energy,
Yeah.
and you're looking at a 3% increase
Sure.
for inflation.
Yeah.
Because BC Utility Commission will do steps, right? It won't
Yeah.
be a ramp, but they'll step it and it'll stay with inflation. Calculation was 15 years is my payback for zero.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
and I always look at people, because everybody goes, like, people who know a little bit will say, well, what's the return on investment? Right? And those same people will go spend 30 grand on a kitchen upgrade that within 20 years, within a decade is worth zero to the house. Whereas your solar system is worth something every day for the life of the house, really.
Okay.
So
Well, that's good. Yeah.
it's
I
totally
mean,
worth it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we're one of the cheapest electricity in Canada, I think. So if it pays here, it pays
Yeah, I
pretty
think
much anywhere.
when you look at the average rate for all of the US, I think it's close to 15 cents now, with like high spikes, Southern California and Massachusetts now, I guess.
Oh yeah. Well, all of New England basically is really
Yeah.
expensive. New York too, New York, New Jersey. The whole Northeast is really expensive. So
Yeah. And the other thing I'll comment with regards to the Cobalt thing is, I'm not denying anything about Cobalt and how it's not a good thing. Totally. But I had to put it into context of what the current status quo is. And even accepting that it's not great, even if we continued making batteries with Cobalt, we're still saving so many people, like lives, millions. So that is something I turn back to people who want to have that sort of argument. And I go, get back to me when you save 7 million lives with whatever you're doing with your ICE engine.
yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that.
The other calculation, Stefan, is the value it adds to your house. And in my case, it worked out to about $1,000 per panel. So my house value increased by about $25,000.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good.
Well, that's just going to my kids. Who cares?
Well, yeah, but